Good morning, everybody.
Recording started.
Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon. Welcome in. This is your recording for your 11.05 quiz. So we're going to go through all of this today. Before we begin here, I want to look at this warm-up. Obviously, we're not in class, so the warm-up is going to be a little bit different. But what happens to the dollar when there is high inflation? Well, obviously, when you look at high inflation, that means that the inflation rate, things are going to cost a lot more. What happens to the dollar is that the dollar actually goes down. So you can write dollar goes down. So when the dollar goes down, that means that it is the value of that dollar is lower than what it should be. So it's going to take more dollars to pay for something. So it's important that you know what inflation is, and inflation is obviously the cost of something. And so when you have the high cost of something, the value of the dollar goes down. And so when you're looking at world economics, you know that it all has to deal with, how well the currency is doing of that particular country. It will tell you how well that country is doing economically. So let's go ahead and look at this. It is personal finance. Today is April 7th, 2020. And of course, I am recording this for your learning purposes. So make sure that you are listening to this. And as you go through this, by all means, use this as a way to do your quiz, have it going on alongside your quiz, what have you. It just is a good way to have as another resource for you as you are doing your quiz. Today we are going to be talking about our 11.05 quiz or test, national and global finances. Obviously with things the way that they're going on, I wish I had some time to talk about this, but I don't. So this will be a kind of like a brief overview of some national and global financing. All right, so here are our expectations. Obviously, our expectations for class are a little different since this is a recording. Always make sure that you're coming prepared. When I say coming to prepared for a recording, is that you're listening to it. I have a lot of valuable information for you, so make sure that you're listening to this recording and that you're using this information to hopefully pass your quiz. Right down here is my phone number and my email in case you have any questions to ask me. I will tell you that our 11.05 quiz, this is our last one before the quarter ends. Look at this. We have completed all of this together. I am so proud of each and every one of you. There are still a few people out there. I know you can do it. Get those TGAs in. Get that passing grade before that quarter ends. I know it's kind of a little different with technically our school not being open, but you are kind of responsible for that work. I want you to get that work in. Make sure you get that taken care of. Again, I'm here for you. I'm here to help you in any way that I can. So again, it's just kind of it's a really kind of a strange point for even as a teacher here. What we are supposed to be doing. I do want to see that you get this stuff in, and I really want to encourage you to get that stuff in. So today we have our 11.05 quiz, and that's what we're going to be working on right now. So our goal of obviously is going to be talking about some discussions. We're going to do some polling. Obviously we can't really poll if I'm doing a recording, but I will discuss those polling questions. And then if you have any questions, by all means email me at the end of this recording. All right, so the lesson goal is hopefully by the end of this lesson, you should be able to pass quiz 11.05 on national and global financing. So let's go ahead and jump right in here. So what is the Federal Reserve? Well, the Federal Reserve was created by the U.S. Constitution or the U.S. Congress in 1913. There had to be some regulations on our money. We couldn't just keep printing money. And what happened, especially during the Civil War, is we had people just printing money, and if you print money, it's going to be valueless. Okay, and so you actually had to only print for what you can back. And so the Congress in 1913 decided to establish the Federal Reserve. That was a place which would print money only if we were able to back it. And what do I mean by backing that money is either if we had the substantial means of, and back in the day, if we had enough gold to kind of make sure that our money was valuable. The main goal is to study and implement monetary policies. Again, we don't want to be kind of just throwing money out everywhere. It doesn't work like that. The Fed is headed by a government agency in Washington known as the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve. So again, it is very closely watched, and so especially when economy is bad, you'll notice that the Federal Reserve will watch that and do some different things with interest rates. You may have heard, especially right now in the news, with a lot of people who are filing for unemployment and losing their jobs. You might have heard the Fed lowering interest rates and doing some different things. If you haven't, listen closely, because it has been something that has been talked about, especially right now in our trying times. The Fed gets its funding from lending money to banks and then collecting interest on those loans. So what happens is the Federal Reserve actually loans money to the bank, and the bank then will then loan you that money, and obviously will cost you a higher interest rate, because on top of that, the bank's paying back the interest rate from the Federal Reserve. That's how the Federal Reserve gets their money, but the bank also wants to profit on it. That's why, as the people who are borrowing it, the lowly people down here who are borrowing it, we're going to be charged a much higher interest rate than maybe even the bank who is borrowing this money from the Federal Reserve. So the current chair is Jerome H. Powell. There is his picture right there. He is currently in the seat as head, I guess you could say head person of the Federal Reserve. All right, so let's talk about this. Which of the following things does the U.S. Constitution allow the U.S. government to do? And so I'm going to actually kind of fill you in here, but that means it's going to be doing D, both A and C. The U.S. Constitution allows the U.S. government to print money and punish people who counterfeit that money, because you don't want anybody. What happens? Think about it. If you have people who are just going to print all this money, is it going to be worth anything? No. And so that's why you do not want anybody counterfeiting that money, meaning that they're going to print money on the basis that saying it is real, but really is not. And that is actually it's a federal offense, and so you can go to jail for many years if you are caught counterfeiting any money or printing any money. Okay. C is impose and collect federal taxes. That is in the U.S. Constitution, that they are required to impose and collect federal taxes. Well, the reason being is that we need to make sure that our government has enough money to run. Okay, and that's where taxes come into place. We have a lot of programs that help our citizens here in the United States, and well, we need to make sure that those programs are funded. And so that's where our tax dollars come into play, and especially right now when it is tax season. Okay, and just recently, if you've again watched the news, taxes are supposed to be collected by April 15th. Well, our president has extended that, and it's been extended for 90 days. So that means that it is not due. Your taxes are not due until July 15th. So, but you do have to pay your taxes. It is in the U.S. Constitution as a obligation as an American citizen to pay your taxes. If you don't pay your taxes, you could see some jail time or some fines with that. All right. So what is domestic commerce refer to? So let's look at that. Domestic commerce refers to the buying and selling of products, and it's right here. I almost put the wrong one. Is the buying and selling of products within a particular country. Domestic meaning here. So we could say domestic commerce would be trading, importing, or exporting of any goods within the United States. So we may buy corn from Kansas. That is domestic commerce, okay? It is here within the United States. We're not trading or selling any of our goods between different countries. That's something different, okay? Domestic is obviously within our country that we are selling and trading any goods, okay? So that is C. It refers to the buying and selling of products within a particular country. All right, next we're going to talk about identifying. So the decisions a government makes to control the supply of money, availability of money, and value of money is a policy, and it is called the monetary policy. policy. Okay, that is the ability, that policy is set into place again to give you value on your money. If we have more money than we need, or if people just keep printing money, our money becomes valueless. And so we want to make sure that we do have some value to our money. And so we have this monetary policy that allows that supply of money to be controlled. Okay, how much money we have circulating right now, and the value of it. We want to make sure that we keep it up. The way the government collects money and spends on its goods and services it provides is obviously through taxing. Okay, that's how the programs that we have in set. That's how it's all kind of collected, or how the money is where that those programs are using is coming from tax dollars that we do pay on a yearly basis. All right, so money, credit, and economic growth. We have to understand that too little money and credit will equal a recession or a depression. Okay, when there isn't enough money or credit in the economy and the economy is shrinking, it is called a recession. When recession gets especially bad, it is called a depression. So when you look back into the Great Depression and you look at the economy was really, really good. We were just coming out of World War I. We had a lot of we had a lot of exports and imports to many different countries. It was booming. Our economy was booming. Well, what happens after war is that we no longer need any of that stuff. And so what happens is all those factories start closing up and all those people start losing their jobs. Well, it decided our economy became in a recession because if people are losing their jobs right now, and it kind of goes along the same lines right now. A lot of people lost their jobs because of what's been going on in the virus and everything else. And so when I look back into the Great Depression, people lost their jobs. Unfortunately, they're unable to pay for anything. Before that, people were buying stuff and because people had money, people had jobs. When you don't have a job, you don't pay anything. And so the economy starts shrinking. And with that being said, that is called a recession. Now, when that recession becomes so bad that people can't afford anything, the value of a dollar becomes really bad, then that is called a depression. Now, you also have the flip side. Too much money and credit equals an inflation. When there is too much money or credit in the economy usually enters a period of inflation. Prices will, and I will put this right here, will go up. Okay. The fact that there is too much money or credit in the economy, it causes inflation. So if people have a lot of money, people are able to spend a lot. Again, yes, that's good. But what happens is if we notice that people can spend more, well, we'll just raise our prices so that people will buy at a higher rate. Kind of like with housing, it kind of coincide with like the housing market. If people are able to get those higher loans, people are going to spend that money. They're going to get into those higher loans. But unfortunately, what happens when maybe they lose a job, or maybe they kind of lived outside of their means and they're unable to afford those big loans, or they're maybe unable to afford that the stuff they have bought? Unfortunately, then we have default. Both inflation and recession can make people cautious about how they spend their money. Obviously, with the recession, you want to save as much as you can because you don't know where that next paycheck may come from. You don't know if what's going to happen. Now, with inflation, obviously, people want to make sure that they don't live outside of their means. Again, both of these things cause caution to when they're talking about money. All right, let's talk about the Federal Reserve tools. We have three different Federal Reserve tools. First of all is what we call the discount rate. The discount rate is the interest rate that the Fed charges banks to borrow money from the Federal Reserve. Okay, so remember the Federal Reserve, we call it the Fed. Okay. If they're going to loan a bank some money, a chunk of money, and they're going to loan that bank a chunk of money at 2%, it is lower than, obviously it is lower than the rates banks will charge their customers to borrow. If they're going to loan that money at 2%, and let's say that bank wants to earn a profit of 3%, they might charge that person 5%. Okay, that's not bad. But if the Federal Reserve is going to loan the bank at 5%, which is pretty high for that particular loan, and the bank still wants to get their 3%, what are they going to charge that customer? They're going to charge that customer as 8%. Okay, now that's high. Okay, and so again, you kind of watch what the Federal Reserve does. If the Federal Reserve interest rates are low, then obviously at the bank, you're probably going to get a lower interest rate. If the Federal Reserve rates are high, you're probably going to get a very high interest rate, whatever you may be borrowing for. When interest rates are very low, it's easy for people to borrow money, which gives them more spending power and causes more money to circulate. Okay, again, interest rates are low, more people have more money to spend. Again, that's the whole idea. We want to have a booming economy. We want people to spend. Let's lower those interest rates. But when interest rates are high, it's not easy for people to borrow money, which gives them less spending power because they're not going to want to spend because it's too expensive to spend, and causes the money supply to go down. Okay, so just remember that when interest rates are low, people are ready to buy. I can buy a lot of different things, but when interest rates are high, I'm not going to spend a lot of money because I can't afford it. So just remember that when we talk about that. What happens if the Feds lowers the reserve requirements? So if the Federal Reserve lowers their reserve requirements, banks will be able to loan more money. Again, more money, more spending power for us people, because just like I told you before, if the interest rates are low from the Federal Reserve, then the interest rate that the bank is going to charge you is probably going to be a little lower than if it was higher, because the bank wants to earn a profit too. So if the interest rates are low from the Feds and it goes to the bank turns around and wants to earn an interest rate, well then ultimately it will be lower than what it would be if the Feds had a higher interest rate. So again, more spending power here. So A would be the best answer. All right, let's talk about if a giant tanker filled, now we're going to kind of switch gears here. So if a giant tanker filled with crude oil spills into the ocean, who would be responsible for supervising the cleanup? Would it be the Federal Trade Commission? Environmental Protection Agency, or the Food and Drug Administration? Well, we're talking about crude oil, so we know automatically that it will not be the Food and Drug Administration. Okay, that has to deal with foods. It has to deal with prescriptions and drugs. The FDA is not going to have anything to do with it. Well, you might have a couple of different answers. You might have the Federal Trade Commission, because obviously, where did we get that oil? Is it here? Did we do a domestic commerce? Because we do have a lot of oil, especially when we look up in Alaska. That is a huge hotbed of oil reserve for us. Or did we get it somewhere else? So again, we have to think about that. And so then we look at the Environmental Protection Agency. Well, it would probably be more like the Environmental Protection Agency. Reason being is because obviously we're talking about the environment, and we're talking about the oceans. When you go out into oceans, that means that nobody owns that particular ocean. No country owns it, so it's open and free. So you have to actually have some kind of environmental protection agency in which all countries are involved in, especially when it comes to open ocean and that particular. So it would be the Environmental Protection Agency. All right, let's talk about global trade and government regulations. Governments often regulate international trade by doing things like tariffs. Tariffs is a charge or a tax on what we call exports and imports of goods. Okay, so exports and obviously imports of goods. Okay, they limit which products can be traded. There are certain products that cannot be traded, especially when we talk about in the U.S. And they limit the amount of trade, because you don't want to have your particular area that you're going to be trading with, especially internationally, to be saturated. If you're going to have a lot of people trading with the same thing, it's not going to be worth anything. It's not going to be a profit. People can say, oh, I can get it somewhere else cheaper. So again, limiting the amount of what we trade and how we trade it is important when we're talking about governments regulating international trade. We also have the idea of free trade. Free trade is when governments do not interfere with trade between countries. That could be very good. There is no tariffs, there is no anything. They can trade back and forth freely. Some people say, yeah, that's good. We should be able to open up free trade throughout all countries. But some countries actually rely on those tariffs, those exports and imports, those taxes on those exports and imports to survive. So again, you have to kind of look at your situation here. Free trade does sound great on paper, but really essentially, if you go to a country who relies heavily on exports or even exporting of goods and relies on those taxes, can that country survive? And so that's where that question comes in, is free trade really good? We do have trade balances, is the comparison between a country's, again, exports and imports. And let me write that in there. Exports and our imports. Okay, that is again, we have to have a balance of those things. If we have one or the other, we don't have a balance. And what happens is, if we have a lot of taxes on our imports, goods that are going to another country, if we're paying a lot of taxes in another country and we're not exporting a lot of things, then unfortunately we're going to be losing our money. And so again, you have to have a nice balance between the exports, what we take out of our country, the imports, what are coming into our country, so it has a nice balance. All right, what are the following factors that makes currency more attractive to investors? Well, when you look at this one, it is actually going to be C here. Slow inflation rates. With low inflation rates, what happens is our money is not overvalued, and it's not decreasing its value. Okay, so and when we have low inflation rates, that means that things aren't costing us, much more than what they should be. It's saying that our money's pretty stable, that it's not overvalued, and that it's the decrease of that value is not going to go down. Okay, and so low inflation rates really kind of help foreign investors and say, this is a country that I could invest in and I could put my money in, because look, they're pretty stable. They have low inflation rates, nothing is ballooning out of sorts, and that their value or their money does have value. And it's important to know that when you do have money, or when a country has money, you need to make sure you look at the exchange rates and the value of that particular money. And so that's where it comes in, where we talk about the exchange rate tells you the value of currency. Currency when exchanged for another country's currency. So for example, if you look up any exchange rates, if you can get, so if I had $1 and what I can get for that dollar, let's say I can get for $1 I can get 1,000 pesos. Okay, I don't know what the current exchange rate. Let's see. Oh no. Let me see. I'll look that up, but if you look up the currency exchange rate, it tells you a lot about that country's money. If I can get a lot of money from that country with the $1 I have, I would say that our dollar is pretty strong and that their dollar is pretty weak, because what's happening is you're going to need a lot more money to purchase something in that particular country. So again, exchange rates do tell you a lot. And we've talked about a little bit about exchange rates earlier on in the course, and they do kind of tell you how a country is doing. If I have to have a lot of dollars, US dollars, so let's say $2 only gives me a little bit of the other country's money, I would say that the US dollar is weak at that point. And you may have heard people talking about how is the US dollar strong or weak. It's that. And it has to do with the exchange rates between other countries. Okay, so check into it. Take the opportunity to really kind of look into that stuff. All right. Hopefully, this is a pretty short review. Hopefully, if you have any questions, by all means, please email me. Hopefully that when you do look into this recording and you watch this recording, that you see that This will help you with this 11.05 quiz. Again, to find this 11.05 quiz, you look under content. You can look up under unit 11 and then scroll down to 11.5 assessment. Okay, I will put the unit or the 11.05 quiz up on the announcements also with this recording so that you have both of them at the same at your fingertips, I guess you can say. So with that being said, again, if you need any help, please let me know. I'm here to help you, and stay safe, stay healthy, and we will see you again real soon.
Recording stopped.